Good morning. Good morning and welcome to Georgia Regents University. I'm Gretchen Kaufman, the Executive Vice President and Provost, and it is my distinct honor to have you all here and to welcome so many of you. We have not only today those in this room, but also we are streaming to another room just next to us. So thanks to each and every one of you in whatever room you are for joining us. Please stand as our Georgia Regents University ROTC presents the colors and for our national anthem.
Present. Arms. Order. Arms. Left. Pace. Forward. March.
Thank you. Please be seated. It's now my distinct privilege to introduce to you our President of Georgia Regents University, Ricardo Aziz.
Good morning. That was a wonderful display again of our country. Welcome to Georgia Regents University and welcome to this beautiful J. Harold Harrison, MD, Education Commons building. This is actually the first time we've officially used it other than the opening last week, so we're very proud of it. I did want to thank Senator Chambliss first, foremost, for supporting this effort, supporting GRU, and for his many years of service, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. I want to thank Admiral Rogers for being here this morning. Thank you. General Fogarty, thank you very much for being here as well. Colonel Cerruto, Colonel Buckner, Mayor and our mayor of the city, Copenhagen, please thank you for being here. We know that this was a tremendous effort for all of you to be here, and also a tremendous effort to all our panelists, our moderators, and as well as our representatives and other state officials. We really do thank you for being here. Now, many of you are first-time visitors to our campus, and I'd like to take just a moment to introduce Georgia Regents University, both in description through my words and through a video that I'd like to show you now. We are one of Georgia's 4 research universities and Georgia's only public academic health center and only dental school. We offer 125 programs and degrees from across 9 schools and colleges in a wide variety of academic disciplines. We have 9,000 students and residents, a workforce of more than 10,000, more than 50,000 living alumni, multiple campuses across our state, more than 1,200 affiliated teaching sites, and last year we generated $1.8 billion in local economic impact. We have been on a transformative journey over the last several years on a way to realizing our ambitious but fully achievable goal to be a top-tier university that is a destination of choice for education, healthcare, discovery, creativity, and innovation. Education, discovery, creativity, and innovation. 4 of GRU's strengths that align perfectly with why we are here today. All of them will be critical in solving one of today's most challenging problems, keeping our data, our nation, and our economy safe and secure in an increasingly digital and dangerous world. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security has designated October to be National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, to raise awareness and provide tools to increase our resilience in the face of escalating threats. A quick look at the headlines makes it clear that cybersecurity is a critical issue in today's world. These headlines are from just one day last week. Hackers stole 7 million passwords from Dropbox. J.P. Morgan Chase hacking affects 76 million households. FBI issues alert on Chinese hacking plot. Russian hackers use bug in Microsoft Windows for spying. Many of these hackers are actually young people. British journalist Misha Glenny spent hundreds of hours interviewing cyber criminals for his book, Dark Market. He noted that teenagers are not usually the main targets of the FBI, but for the cyber division, they appear to be the norm. And he found that more than half of them were well above average in math and science. And that's why we are here today. We have a critical need for cybersecurity experts to protect our data, our economy, and our national security. We need to harness the talents of our young people for the right side, and we must provide them with educational and career opportunities so they can become the best next generation of cybersecurity experts. We all have a stake in this issue, and the summit gives those of us on the leading edge the opportunity to explore ways we can all work together, government, industry, and higher education, to ensure the safety and the security of our data and our world. Georgia Regents University has been a neighbor and a partner of Fort Gordon for many, many years, helping to provide our servicemen and women, our veterans, and their families with a college education with the health care that they need. When the U.S. Army locates its cyber command here to Fort Gordon, centralizing its operational cyber headquarters and the majority of its cyber missions forces right here in Augusta, we, our GRU, are going to be prepared and honored to take a leading role in this partnership, in a partnership that involves our local K-12 schools, our business communities, our local government, and our university. And we intend to build the cybersecurity education programs of tomorrow, to work together to make Augusta, Georgia, the epicenter of cybersecurity innovation and development in America, to contribute our best efforts, the talents and skills and abilities of our stellar faculty, students, and staff to make our community, our state, our nation, and really the world a more secure and safe place to live in. Now it is my true honor to introduce our next speaker, Senator Saxby Chambliss, a congressional leader, a man whom Georgians have elected and re-elected to represent us for 20 years, and who has generously agreed to host our Cyber Education Summit here in Augusta. During his service in the House of Representatives, he established expertise and leadership in homeland security and intelligence matters. So when he was elected to the Senate, he was appointed to the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. In 2011, he became vice chairman of that vital committee. And Senator Chambliss also serves today on the Senate Armed Services Committee and shares a deep support for our nation's military. We all owe a debt of gratitude to Senator Chambliss for his steadfast support of our education, of our military, of our university, and of our country. His retirement this year will be a great loss to all Georgians and indeed to all Americans. We will miss him in the Senate, which is why we are so fortunate to have access to him for his invaluable expertise today here in Augusta, here at GRU, and we are honored to have him support our event. Please join me in welcoming a true statesman, a true patriot, Senator Saxby Chambliss.
Thank you very much, Dr. Aziz, and thank you for that very generous welcome. And it's good to be back in Augusta. What a great day to be here, and what a wonderful facility you guys have got. This is going to attract a lot of folks, just the physical facilities that you've got, Ricardo. And I'm indeed privileged to be here for this particular event. I want to thank Dr. Aziz and the leadership at GRU for having the idea, number one, of incorporating what's happening at Fort Gordon with what's happening at Georgia Regents University, and more importantly, what's going to happen both at Fort Gordon as well as here at GRU. When I go around the country or around our state and I talk about Al-Qaeda, I talk about ISIL, I talk about Al-Shabaab, people get excited. They're interested in hearing what you have to say. And the reason they are is because, as I relate to it, being a recovering lawyer still, that's a road wreck case. People can listen to that and they have seen something on the news or somehow they identify with it. And then all of a sudden I go to talking about what I think long term is the most serious issue we have from a national security perspective, and that's cybersecurity. And all of a sudden people's eyes glaze over because they can't see anything. They don't know really what's happening out there in that world. and there's nothing that they can put their finger on. But what's happened over the last couple of years with respect to the disclosures about Home Depot, about Target, about J.P. Morgan, and the list goes on, people are finally starting to pay attention. And that's why I'm so particularly pleased that we've had the kind of response to this event today that we're having. Because what the issue is about today, from the standpoint of the public, is that we have a job to do as policymakers and as folks involved in the military side of this to educate the public about not just what's going on today, but where is this going? What are the Russians? What are the Chinese? What are the Iranians? Or what is that 15-year-old kid down the street up to? And it literally gets to that degree of differences as to where these intrusions are coming from. How many intrusions are there out there? Gee, we have no idea. But one thing we do know, in the year 2013 alone, the Department of Defense and the Department of Energy's National Nuclear Energy Association had 10 million intrusions a day into their systems. So that's the kind of battle that's going on out there all across our country and all across the world today. And right here in the CSRA area, with Fort Gordon and with NSA, with now the movement of Cyber Command here under General Fogarty, you were at the point of the spear on this issue. And you're going to have a lot of conversation today, not just about the issue itself, not just about some things that are going to happen at both NSA as well as at Cyber Command, as well as within the Signal Corps at Fort Gordon. But you're also going to become aware of some challenges that you're going to have as a community that hosts this great institution called Fort Gordon and the inhabitants within that post. So it's going to be an exciting time for Augusta. It's an exciting time for America to think about the fact that some of the brightest minds that we have all across the country are located right here and going to be dealing with this issue that no longer causes people's eyes to glaze over. As I get ready to go out into the private sector again, the one thing I am absolutely certain of, that while everybody is concerned about terror, we're reminded of terror and terrorists, we're reminded of just what happened within the last 24 hours, what a dangerous world it is that we live in. But I know that the major discussion that is ongoing within every corporate boardroom is focused on cybersecurity. That's why it's so important that we take this issue and we develop a partnership between the federal government and the private sector. We in the federal government are not always trusted, and in the world we live in today with recent disclosures that have been made over the last couple of years, that trust relationship is more fragile than ever. But let me just make sure that everybody here understands that from a cybersecurity perspective, the U.S. government is the best advocate that we have and is the best prepared partner that the private sector can have. We have the equipment, we have the know-how, we have the experience to deal with the issue, and we've simply got to educate people across the country of why it is so important that trusting relationship between the federal government and the private sector gets stronger and stronger. Senator Feinstein and I recognized a couple of years ago, she is the chairman of the Intelligence Committee and I am the vice chair. Our relationship on the Intel Committee is a little bit unusual in that I'm not a ranking member, which is what happens with a minority member on every other committee. I'm the vice chair, so I have just as much power and authority basically as she does, and that is a great relationship because we are one of the truly bipartisan committees. But we both had competing cybersecurity information sharing bills that we came up with a couple of years ago. And we realized that neither one of our bills was going anywhere. We were just going to butt heads, and yet we both knew that this is the most important long-term issue that we face from a national security perspective. So we made a commitment to each other that we were going to sit down and we were going to resolve our differences. We were going to make the right kinds of compromises to come up with a piece of legislation that does allow for sharing of information between the government and the private sector, between the private sector and the private sector, to address this issue of cybersecurity. And we did that. And it took us a while. It took us well over a year to get that done. But 3 months ago, we had a bill that came out of committee on a 12-3 vote. And we are now hoping that when we get back for the lame duck session, that we're going to have that bill on the floor of the Senate for debate. And when we do, I'm very confident it's going to pass in an overwhelming way, because the issue is not a partisan issue. It is not a Republican or a Democrat issue. It truly is an American issue that needs to be resolved. And let me, NSA has such a major presence here, and I didn't know until Mike McConnell, who was the director of NSA. He was also DNI for a period of time, and I had the opportunity to work very closely with him. Great American. He's going to be one of your panelists today. Mike was just telling me this morning that when he was director of NSA, the decision was made to move the facility to Fort Gordon. And Mike Rogers just telling me that caused a lot of consternation. I can only imagine the political consternation it caused when you talk about moving lots of people out from surrounding D.C. area to a place called Augusta, where? They play golf down there, right? But what a great vision that was for NSA back then, and what a great opportunity and a challenge to this community. You met it then, and I'm confident you're going to meet it in the future. NSA has taken some very unjustified hits over the last couple of years. And without detailing all of them, let me just say that I get shocked every now and then when I see somebody quoted in the press or being interviewed in the news and say, well, I worked at NSA, and y'all obviously know who I'm referring to, and let me tell you what these bad guys did and what I could have done. And I'm shocked because I know that what this individual is saying is simply not true. There's simply no way that that individual could have done what they claim they could have done. The point I'm making is that NSA has taken those unjustified hits, but let me just assure all of you who are here, not as an NSA employee or in uniform, about the fact that since September 11, 2001, we have not suffered another attack on domestic soil. There's a reason for that. And the reason is that our intelligence committee is very, very good. NSA is a major part of that intelligence community. These men and women do a terrific job every single day of assisting the community in gathering the right kind of intelligence to make sure that we do not suffer another attack on domestic soil. And when you look at those individuals who are getting up every morning, and there are literally thousands of them around the world today, who wake up every morning and try to think of ways that they can kill and harm Americans, we should have an even greater appreciation for the terrific job that our men and women at NSA, as well as our other folks across the community, do. And it made me very proud. I've been fortunate to be in theater dozens of times over the last 20 years. And I go to some very strange places. But every time I'm in theater, there's always somebody who comes up to me and introduces themselves, and they say, I am from NSA Georgia. And they also, likewise, are in those strange and remote places, putting their life in harm's way to make sure that America and Americans are protected. I'm particularly proud to be here today to introduce my dear friend Mike Rogers. Admiral Rogers, I'm not sure what happened early in life, and the only negative sign of his background is that he obviously couldn't get into Georgia, so he had to go to Auburn. And he has somehow gotten over that. Mike Rogers has been a long-time member of the intelligence community within the United States Navy. He has held every significant position from an intelligence standpoint that there is. Back in March, when Keith Alexander made the decision to finally retire, he had tried to do it a couple of times before, and the administration would not let him do so. But he called me up and told me about his decision, and I said, okay, so who's going to take your place? He said, well, there's only one person, and that's Mike Rogers, and I hope you'll support him. And I have known Admiral Rogers for many, many years, obviously prior to that, and I was very pleased to be an early supporter in the confirmation process for him to become the new director of NSA. Now, he not only is director of NSA, but he is very unusual in the military world. Keith Alexander, as an Army general, was what we call dual-hatted. He wore the hat of director of NSA. He also wore the hat as director of Cybercom, commander of Cybercom. There's no other dual-hatted individual in the United States military. And there was a lot of back and forth as to whether or not we needed to split those commands when General Alexander retired. But as we quickly found out, Mike Rogers is an individual who is very capable of wearing both of those hats. And Mike has now become the second individual in the United States military to be dual-hatted. He brings not just a wealth of experience, but he brings a wealth of the ability to communicate to the employees of NSA and Cyber Command across the world that is unparalleled. He is just a really, really good guy with some good Georgia roots. He and I were talking about the varsity last night, that he used to visit from his Auburn days, and anybody that goes to the varsity has a great appreciation for Atlanta, Georgia. And I'm very pleased that when we asked him to come down today and keynote this event, he readily agreed to it. So please welcome, if you will, the Director of the National Security Agency and the Commander of U.S. Cybercom, Admiral Mike Rogers.
Please. Well, how's everybody doing today? Man, today is a beautiful day. If you could bottle the weather, this beautiful facility, and the community of Augusta, into one capsule that would never change, you truly have something incredibly powerful. After watching that video, seeing this facility, looking at that beautiful weather outside, I thought, man, it might not be too bad moving down from D.C. down here, you know? I want to say thank you very much to all of you. You're very busy individuals. You have many other things you could be doing with your time, and yet you have made the decision that there is merit in participating in a discussion in a forum designed to talk about cybersecurity, and particularly how do we generate the workforce and the partnerships that we need for the future. Before I get into that from my perspective, let me first say thanks to Dr. Aziz for the kind invitation. To the Senator, thank you very much again, sir. As you heard Doc say, we should all be very, very thankful that we have men and women in our nation who are willing to take on hard jobs. Being a political figure in the world of today in the United States is a hard job. Because like many other professions, at some points in that, they're very high and very, very popular, and other times not so much. We live in an environment at the moment in our nation where seemingly our ability to generate political will and work together to solve problems is continually tested. And yet we have men and women willing to stand up and say, send me to Washington, let me try to help, let me try to be part of the solution. And to do that as part of the legislative branch that functions as the direct representatives of each and every one of us. We are blessed to have a man like Senator Chambliss, who has done this for 20 years, who prepares to step down, only a couple months left, assume the next phase of life here back in his home state. And Senator, just on behalf of the citizens of Georgia, the citizens of the nation, I just want to say thank you. Thank you very, very much. One last comment. You often hear talk about gridlock and intransigence and inability to work together in the political dimension in Washington. I will tell you that the tone that the senator as the vice chair, partnering with Senator Feinstein, the tone that they set on the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence is something that I am proud to be a part of as a senior military individual in the intelligence community. I actually look forward to my interactions with the committee because when I go down there, I think to myself, this is a group of motivated men and women who want to make a difference, and they're willing to forget about politics and political allegiance and ask themselves what makes the most sense for the nation and what can we do to try to work together. You can't put a price on a team like that, and that's due in no small part to Senator Chambliss. Well, let me talk to you a little bit about what I really came to do today, which was share some thoughts and have a dialogue with you because we're going to take some questions as well. I'm much more interested in some ways on what is on your mind. And I wanted to share some thoughts about, so how do we create the cyber workforce of the future? What's the role of education and training? What are the partnerships that we need to create? Before we do that, let me add one other thanks. As you heard, Admiral McConnell is with us today. Anytime I'm with a former director of NSA, I always am reminding our workforce at NSA, we stand on the shoulders of the men and women who went before us. Don't ever forget that. And we owe them a great debt of gratitude. And Admiral McConnell, both as the director of NSA and as the director of national intelligence, has set a great foundation and a great legacy for those of us that try to carry the mantle in the intelligence world today. So, Mike, again, thank you very, very much. So before I get into the specifics, let me talk a little bit first about, so what is this United States Cyber Command and what is NSA's role in this whole cyber thing? Because I thought you guys were an intelligence organization. First, let me talk about United States Cyber Command. 3 primary functions. Number 1, defend the networks of the Department of Defense. Number 2, generate and in large part provide oversight and operational control of the cyber workforce that the Department of Defense is creating. We're creating a dedicated cyber workforce of about 6,200 people in the department. We're about halfway through that journey in time. We're going to get it finished, we think, by the end of fiscal year 16, and we're starting fiscal year 15 right now. And the third mission set at U.S. Cyber Command is, when directed by the President and the Secretary of Defense, provide cyber defensive capability to defend critical parts of United States infrastructure. You may be aware, you may not be, the federal government has designated 16 different segments in the private sector as having direct impact on national security. It's things like energy, power, fuel, financial, aviation. There's 16 total segments. And so the Department of Defense is generating a set of capabilities, teams, and tools designed to, if we're directed, to provide support to the defense of that critical infrastructure because of its national security implications for us as a nation. As part of the creation of that Cyber Command workforce, we identified 4 major concentrations in the United States where we wanted to put most of that workforce. Army Cyber, as one of the service components that is building this force, going to be shifting its headquarters down here to Augusta within the next couple of years. We, as we bring this 6,200 workforce on, we are moving capability down here. So Augusta is one of the 4 primary areas in the United States where the Department of Defense is significantly increasing its cyber presence, if you will. Shifting then to the National Security Agency, NSA has 2 primary missions. One of them gets a lot of attention, and that's our foreign intelligence mission. The cyber connection with our foreign intelligence mission is we use our capabilities and the legal framework that we use to execute our mission. We use that to try to generate insights as to what our nation states, groups, and individuals doing in the cyber arena against the United States and its allies and key friends around the world. The second NSA mission is also critical in the cyber arena. It's the one that gets the least attention, but NSA's second primary mission is to be a primary information assurance mission set. What is that? We are tasked under that information assurance, or think cybersecurity mission, to number one, develop the cryptographic and security standards for the Department of Defense. Number two, to partner with NIST and other elements in the federal government to generate security standards for the U.S. government writ large. The third area is to use those same standards that we develop in the government and partner with others to try to apply them across the private sector in the U.S. And then lastly, we do this through partnerships with the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security, we will provide information assurance and defensive capability when requested to support the private sector. We do that through other federal agencies, and it doesn't get much publicity. And the final thing we do in the information assurance mission is we develop countermeasures to many of those vulnerabilities you're seeing out there. So take Heartbleed, for example. Many of you are familiar with that. Major vulnerability comes out April the 7th of this year. Within 24 hours, using our technical capabilities, we write a set of capabilities designed to circumvent the use of the vulnerability of Heartbleed, and we then provide those to antivirus companies. You will never, ever hear about that. What I tell people is this is not about credit. This is about mission execution and helping to defend our nation. So just give the data, give the insights, give the counter, if you will. Let's share it with the private sector, and we don't have to worry about getting credit. It's the part of the NSA mission that doesn't get much attention, but it's a critical part to me for the nation, because NSA has some amazing technical and cyber capabilities. It does great things for the nation, both in terms of its ability to help us generate insights as to what others are doing, but also in attempting to secure the cyber defenses of our own nation. So those are the two hats I wear. In that NSA role, likewise, we decided to shift much of the workforce, and you heard the senator reference Admiral McConnell's decision. Now, we're coming up on almost 30 years now since we first thought of this idea. We shifted that focus out of the Fort Meade area, which is between Washington and Baltimore, where we're headquartered, and we decided we needed to disperse this a little bit. And Augusta is here at Fort Gordon, is one of 4 locations in the United States where we do this. In fact, the National Security Agency team here in Georgia, NSA Georgia as we call it, is the largest single entity at Fort Gordon. There are thousands of us down here, and those men and women are working every day from here in Augusta, Georgia, and supporting military operations and cyber efforts in a huge swath of the world, both by going forward from Augusta, whether they're on the ground in Afghanistan, have a small handful on the ground in Iraq as we move there right now. The men and women here do it every day. They make a great difference, and you're not going to hear much about it because that's the nature of our business. We don't talk much about what we do. It's been an interesting dynamic as an organization then for us in the last 15 months because we normally don't talk much about what we do. That's not our culture. It's all about get the job done and make sure we do it the right way. What I always remind the workforce is we follow the rule of law. We remain accountable to the citizens of the nation we defend. When we make a mistake, we stand up and we say we made a mistake. And then finally, we don't cut corners. We do the right thing the right way. As long as we do that, the nation's going to be there for us because the nation needs us. And I am very honored to be the director of the National Security Agency. And I am very honored to be a member of the NSA team. And as I tell the workforce, I am not going to apologize to anybody for that because I believe in what the men and women of NSA do, and I believe in the mission of NSA. I've been a benefactor of NSA as a tactical guy, wearing a uniform, on the tactical edge around the world, and now I find myself leading the organization, and I'm honored to do that. What I wanted to do then was, first, say thanks to the men and women here in Augusta, Georgia. You have created an amazing community. putting on my Navy hat now, we first started putting sailors here about 20 years ago now. And I can still remember a lot of people in my own culture going, Augusta, Georgia, what? There's no ocean there. What are we doing putting sailors in Augusta, Georgia? But we did it because we saw the future. We thought the investments that NSA then, and now Cyber Command now, was making in Augusta were worth investing in. So we started moving sailors down here about 20 years ago. In a previous life, when I was a little bit more junior, one of my jobs was I was responsible for deciding where our officer manpower should be distributed around the world. And early in the 90s, the only bigger challenge I had at times getting people to come down here, quite frankly, was then getting them to leave. Because I would say, you can't stay here forever, you guys. We got ships and other things, none of which are home ported here in Augusta. We have to fill our other slots around the world. But the men and women, not just in the Navy, but now 20 years later, as you look at literally the thousands of men and women under both U.S. Cyber Command and NSA that we have working at Fort Gordon, whether they be active duty military, reservists, our civilian individuals, our contractors, they just love it down here. And they love it down here because they feel that they're a part of a community that cares about them and recognizes the value of what they do and is willing to acknowledge in a public way the value of what they do. So I just want to say thank you very much for creating an environment that motivated men and women want to be a part of it. They want their families to be a part of it. So thank you very much. That doesn't just happen. You all as a community have made that happen. Now let's talk for a minute about, we're going to build this cyber force. And remember, it'll have both uniforms as well as civilians. Don't think for 1 minute that this is one or the other. The first point I would make to you is cyber is the ultimate team sport to me. It is all about how do we create partnerships and relationships that harness the capability of both the private sector as well as what we're doing in the government. Now, that's a challenge for us. If you look at the way traditionally as a society we are structured, I'll give you a couple of thoughts. First, in the Department of Defense, geography is one way we like to define problem sets sometimes. So we have a Central Command that worries about the Middle East. We have a Pacific Command, worries about the Pacific, a European Command that worries about Europe. Cyber doesn't recognize geography. Again, which is one reason why you have men and women right here at Fort Gordon today doing things that are impacting the environment half a world away, because we're able to do that and harness the power of technology. So it's one reason we created this idea of a cyber command, because we thought cyber doesn't recognize geography. Another challenge for us is traditionally in our structure as a nation, we have tried to very strongly differentiate between what is a private sector function, what is a governmental function, and what is a function that really falls into the national security arena. And I would argue cyber crosses all three of those lines. There is both a significant private sector element to this, whether it be in the corporate world, whether it be in the academic world. There is a strong U.S. government element to this, as you heard the senator say, which I strongly agree with. The U.S. government has an amazing set of capabilities that you, the taxpayer, have paid for, that you, the taxpayer, have helped to create, even though you're probably not intimately familiar with, nor should you be. We've got to figure out a way that we can apply that capability that we have created in a constructive partnership in the private sector to also address that national security aspect of cyber. It's one reason why, for example, in the government, we've identified these 16 segments as having direct impact on the nation's security. And that because of that, they merit a level of governmental attention and focus, and why we in the military are taking a look at how can we provide DOD's mission to defend the nation, how can we apply that in the cyber arena. So my first point to you would be this is all about partnerships. And you see that today as a microcosm of that. If you are a member of the military, will you raise your hand? If you are associated with GRU or another academic institution, will you raise your hand? If you are associated with the business community in some way, will you raise your hand? Do we have any foreign teammates with us today at all? Way to go. Because because that's another point I would make. Because cyber doesn't recognize geography, there's a huge international dynamic to this. My point is, you are all a microcosm of the challenge that we face. How can we harness the abilities and the capabilities of each of these segments into a cohesive team? Now, today we're going to focus on the idea of how do we create the workforce part of that. But I'd also highlight to you, this is a challenge set that will require multiple dimensions to address it. I often hear from people, well, can't we just solve this with the technology? Isn't there something we can invent that's just going to defend everything and we don't have to worry about it anymore? I do not believe that will happen. My view is this is not a problem that technology alone will fix. In the end, I've always been a believer, if it's designed and built by man, it can be defeated by man. That's just the way things are. So for those looking for a single technical fix to this challenge, I would argue, I don't think that's likely. We also need to have a legislative imperative here. It's what Senator Chambliss talked about, and he and his chair teammate, Senator Feinstein, are working very hard to address. We have got to create a legal framework that helps enable this partnership idea, because I want to be able to push information at machine speed in an automated way in terms of what we are seeing. My view is, hey, my job, putting on my intelligence hat as the director of NSA, my job is to help the nation understand, here's what's coming our way. This kind of malware, they'll use these kinds of tactics, techniques, and procedures. This is what they're going to target. This is how they're going to do it. This is what you need to help prepare for. That's what I think I'm supposed to be ready to do. But to do that, we've got to push information out. But I need information to come in, because I'm quick to remind my corporate teammates, under our structure, I am focused on what is happening outside the nation. You, my corporate teammates, are focused on what is happening inside the nation. You're monitoring your networks. I'm not. I need to know, what's the malware you're seeing? Walk me through the technical composition of that malware. Show me what you have done that worked. Show me what you've done that didn't work. Show me your system configuration so I can get a sense about, if I'm going to develop countermeasures to help you, what's going to work for your system, what's not going to work. What have you experienced in the last 24 hours prior to this? Did you see activity that suggests we saw it coming, but we didn't recognize it? Were there any indicators that we can learn from you that we can share across the broader private sector to help others when they try to prepare for this activity? And we have to do that in an automated way, machine to machine. And in order to do that, I think we have to give our corporate teammates a level of legal liability protection. Because one of the things, for example, I get to partner very closely with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Jim Comey is the director. In a previous life, he was the general counsel of the largest brokerage firm in the United States, and he was the general counsel for the largest defense contractor in the United States. And I often say, hey, Jim, when you were the general counsel, what advice did you give the board and give your CEO? And he generally would say, well, to be honest, I would often talk about we need to be very careful about sharing information if we're going to set ourselves up for corporate liability. And we need to be very careful about acting on information we're getting, because we're going to be responsible in the end and we may be held liable. We can't make this work if that's what we're going to do. So I think the legislative piece is a very important part of this, and I thank the senator for his hard work in trying to make this a reality. Because we have got to break down these barriers between the private sector and the government. And as you heard, let's be honest with ourselves. That's not an easy thing to do in the environment we're living in right now. You know, I'll get, you want to do what with NSA? And I'll go, I want to partner. It won't be us directly. I always argue, hey, the FBI, DHS, that's their primary role. We'll partner with them. But we have got to harness the capabilities of the National Security Agency to help this nation as it moves forward in trying to defend against the cyber challenges facing us. Because another point I would make to you, this is not a short-term problem set. If you think that we're going to fix this 2 or 3 years and then we're on to the next challenge, I don't believe that that's going to happen. My view is this is the norm for the future for us. A dynamic environment in which nation states, groups, and individuals are going to constantly be attempting to penetrate corporate systems, government systems, academic systems, whether it's they want to steal intellectual property and gain an economic advantage, whether it's they want to do it for criminal purposes to generate money, whether it's they want to do it for traditional espionage to gain insights into what we're doing, whether they want to do it because they think this opens up the possibility that they could then insert destructive capabilities that would actually destroy infrastructure for us. And we haven't really gotten to that yet. Right now, we're focused on theft of information, but the next logical iteration in all this, and it's happened already in the world around us, fortunately not in a significant way in the United States, although it has happened in the U.S., but it is only a question of the when, not the if. Cyber represents a tremendous vulnerability. Even though you have to admit, it's been one of the greatest changes that has ever affected us as a nation, and I would argue as a species on the planet. We have generated more intellectual information sharing, more economic activity, more innovative ideas through the power of the internet in the last 20 years, arguably, than we have seen in the history of man. All because of an amazing technology that now is foundational to every aspect of our everyday lives in a way that few things else have become. You know, when the Gutenberg, when we invented the printing press and we printed that first Bible, I'm not sure the monks in the monasteries at the time, who had been the primary developers and producers of most written products in the Europe of that time, I don't think the monks understood, hey, our business model is going out the window. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're like those monks. Our business model is going out the window. And we got to think about what do we need to do differently with the challenge of cyber. But even with all that technology, and this is where I really want to end and what the real focus is of today, and then I'll take your questions. You can have the greatest technology in the world. You can have the greatest legislative framework in the world and the greatest information sharing. But to me, the foundational bedrock of everything is a motivated, trained, and well-led workforce. It's that cyber manpower team that makes the difference. And as much as people like to talk about NSA and its amazing technology, or talk about the United States Cyber Command and some of the things we're doing there, I always remind people it's about the men and women. It's not about their technology. It's about the men and women who make it work. So when I'm thinking about the workforce of the future, a couple things I always try to say. Number one, we have got to come up with a system that helps us assess aptitude, not just credentials. What do I mean by that? Merely because you don't necessarily have a formal education in cybersecurity doesn't mean that you don't have a role to play in developing the cyber workforce of the future. We have some amazing talent who has no formal education, who if I ask them, walk me through do you got a PhD, you got a master's degree, they just look at you like, what? We have got to be able to differentiate between aptitude and credentials. It's not either or. We got to build a system that lets us do both, because there's a lot of men and women out there who don't necessarily have those credentials but have amazing aptitude. Secondly, we've got to ask ourselves, if we're going to wait until the time men and women get to college age to focus on what we're going to try to do to develop that educational backbone, then we're way behind the power curve. So fundamental is this, as I've said, to life of today. We need to inculcate this in our foundational educational programs at the elementary and high school level, so that the young men and women today in our society have a foundational level of knowledge. Just like, remember when many of us were kids, they talked to us about the 3 R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic. And remember, go back 30, 40 years, Joe said, everybody's got to have a fundamental understanding of reading, writing, and arithmetic. Doesn't matter what else you want to do, but we all have fundamentals. I think cyber and STEM, if you will, is one of those things. Now, it doesn't mean we're going to turn everybody into some computer scientist. Far from it. I didn't want to go down that path, for example. That turned me off at the time that I was a young person. So we've got to come up and ask ourselves, what are the foundational investments that we need to make? And we'll do that at a county level. We'll do that at a city and a town level. And we'll ask ourselves what makes the most sense. But we can't wait until, okay, I've graduated from high school and now I'm going to get ready. Now I want to think about how do I educate or train myself in the cyber arena. I think there's much more foundational things. When we look at what we're going to do at the college, whether it be undergraduate, graduate, PhD level, one of the things that I'd like us to try to see that if we could do over time is in fields like medicine, like engineering, like the law, even though there's a wide, take medicine, there is probably 100 different disciplines within the medical field. And yet within medicine, we have managed to create the idea of a core set of professional standards that every medical professional must meet, and they must do so over time. So the second point I would make is we have to think about training and education over a continuum. This is not going to be, hey, for that 4 to 10 year period in your life when you're at the undergraduate, graduate, or PhD level, you're going to get your education, job's done, that's all we need to do. We've got to think about a continuum of training and education. And we've got to do that over the life cycle of the workforce. And we've got to ask ourselves, how do we create the partnerships that let us do that? And this is one of the areas where I think the summit and partnerships between what we're doing out at Fort Gordon and GRU is a good example. That's part of this approach to how we develop a continuum of training and education over the life of this workforce. You just can't think to yourself, okay, you're up to speed today, good enough. We got to think about a continuum. Likewise, I think the other thing I always ask our team when we're trying to recruit, because we're out there competing with many of you, trying to get those same motivated men and women with those skills. The things I talked about is do not self-limit. When I talk to our recruiters, when I talk to the portion of the workforce that's tasked with generating the men and women in the force, I always say, remember, think beyond just the credentials piece. Talked about the aptitude piece, but there's another part of this. What I say is that the greatest cybersecurity professionals I've ever seen had amazing creativity. They had a bedrock of proficiency and technical aptitude, but they had amazing creativity. They looked at problem sets from different perspectives. The biggest breakthroughs generally we have when we're looking at problems is because somebody comes at it from a totally different angle and says, hey, did you think about? And everybody goes, wow, I didn't think of that. Curiosity. A workforce that really wants to get into the nuts and bolts and just is curious about understanding why is it the way it is and how can I use that? And then lastly, persistence. That's a big cultural thing. I try to remind the workforce, some of the problem sets we're going to give you, you are going to work days, weeks, and months on. And so if the culture is, which can be a challenge in the society of today we find ourselves, where you are very focused on everything's quick. I want to solve a problem, I want to move, I want to move on. Persistence is a big part of the workforce, I think. It's one of the traits that we need in the cybersecurity professional workforce of the future. We're going to give you some long-term challenges, and you got to have the persistence to keep at it. And you got to be willing to fight through, why is this taking me so long? Why can't I figure this problem out? That is not an insignificant leadership challenge, folks, when you're trying to motivate and lead a cyber workforce. Help them understand that's part of the job. Don't let it get you down. We're not frustrated. We know you're going to get there. This is just going to take us a little while because this is a really complex problem that we've given you. I think what you're doing here in Augusta is a microcosm of all that I've just talked about. How do you create the partnerships that enable you to blur some of those lines? How do you think beyond credentials and also think about aptitude? How do you create a continuum of education and training over time? And how do you build a foundational educational dynamic to helping to create this workforce, starting at the grammar school, elementary school, and into high school level before they get to undergraduate, graduate, and the PhD? And then finally, that, graduate, undergraduate, PhD level, that's kind of the sweet spot where you're really looking for your hardcore, really dedicated, really proficient workforce. That's what's going to generate the greatest volume in general, in my experience. And that's the segment you're asking yourself. So how can we create something that scales? because the requirement for the cybersecurity workforce of the future is not in the hundreds, it's not in the thousands. It will be in the hundreds of thousands, if not more, for us as a nation. We have got to figure out, how do we scale this problem to generate those kinds of numbers? That is not an insignificant challenge for us as a nation. A lot of it's going to have to do with us having a very vocal dialogue with each other and with our broader society about how important this is. Go back 50 years ago. I can remember as a little kid, I was obsessed with the space program. I mean, I can still tell you that the Apollo 5 was 363 feet tall, most powerful rocket ever built by man, 5 J1 engines, 363,000 horsepower. I love that. I couldn't get enough of the space program when I was a little boy. And I can remember everybody talked about, hey, it's all about engineering. It's all about the hard sciences. And we had a whole generation, particularly in the 60s, who were so energized by what they saw that that's what they wanted. We've got to figure out as a society, as a nation, how do we have a dialogue with each other that starts to have that conversation about, look, this is foundational and important for us as a nation for the future. And we need that kind of focus and that kind of level of investment. Doesn't mean everybody's going to be a computer scientist. You'd never hear me say that. But it does mean that I think this is of such foundational nature for us as a nation for the future that we got to have a dialogue about that. That we've got to think, how do we help our young men and women when they're thinking about, so how do I build a future for myself, create a vision for myself and the family that I hope to have one day, perhaps? How do I do that? And again, we want to do it in a way where it's not a cookie cutter, where it's one size fits all. There's great advantage to a workforce that has diversity of experience, diversity of the path they took to get there. We don't want to make everybody a one size fits all cookie cutter. I thank you for your willingness to be here for today and to listen to a few thoughts. I'll take a couple questions because I want to keep us on time, but I'll take a couple questions if anyone would like on any topic. I'd be glad to talk to you about the Auburn, South Carolina game on Saturday if you'd like. Sir, first we'll go in the back. Sir, did someone in uniform about? No, you're hunkering down now. Was there something? Sir?
Sir, how do you foresee the military competing with the civilian sector to get the best and the brightest and keep them in the military at a time when they're going to get paid 3 or 4 times?
Right. So the first comment I make is if the metric is going to be compensation, we're never going to win. I acknowledge that. And I tell people, if the metric in your life is primarily or predominantly driven by the financial side, then we're not the place for you. Nothing wrong with that. You have to decide what's right for you. Here's where we're going to compete. We have an ethos and a culture that people want to be a part of, the idea of serving something bigger than yourself. I'll hear some people my own age talk to me about, well, you can't trust, those millennials. And I think the millennials are focused on the idea of service and something bigger than themselves. You look at the volunteer work that the millennials have done compared to what I did when I was their age. I don't ever remember my peers doing some of the things that age segment is doing because their cultural expectations have changed. Hey, we can work with anybody who's into the idea of serving something bigger than themselves. Third thing, we are going to give you a mission that matters. Not only are you going to do something that is bigger than yourself, but we're going to give you a mission that matters to the men and women of this nation. And you can't put a price on that. The next thing we're going to do that's going to give us an advantage, I believe, is not unlike the corporate sector, and we're going to let you travel the world. We have a footprint that literally spans the globe, whether it's U.S. Cyber Command or the National Security Agency, and I'll move you around that footprint. So if you want to spend some time in Georgia, if you want to spend some time in Hawaii, you want to spend some time in Europe, you want to spend some time in Asia, you want to go to Australia, I can get you there. Finally, we're going to give you responsibility at an early age. Our ethos, our culture in the military, and it's the same at the National Security Agency, is we give you the training we feel you need, and then we try to push you to take responsibility at an early age. Those are the 5 things where I tell the workforce, that's our edge, that's our difference, and we can compete with anybody. We just got to make sure we're defining the way we're competing. And making it about money is not the way that we need to define this, and that's a loser for us. You look at the retention numbers right now in the cyber mission force, our cyber workforce in the uniform side, we're meeting our targets. If you look at retention, for example, in the civilian cyber workforce at NSA, we continue to have amazing retention. My biggest challenge at NSA is not retaining people. The biggest challenge is in today's environment is getting people to come in the front door and talk to us and let us walk you through, here's what we do. I think this might interest you, but you need to make the decision. Once we get them in the door, it is amazing. I mean, NSA's workforce tends to stay with us for 30 to 35 years. That is a very different model from the corporate sector. That's a challenge for us, I will tell you, though, as the new director. One of the things I'm talking to them about is we've got to come up with a model, I believe, where men and women working at NSA can, during the course of their time with us, move into the corporate sector for a little while, come back. We can create partnerships in the corporate sector, bring them in for a little while. Because part of the challenge we've experienced over the last 15 months is, quite frankly, at times between NSA and some elements in the corporate sector, we are just talking past each other. We don't understand each other well. We don't know each other well. We come from different cultures. We don't understand each other's cultures. We're oftentimes physically disparate from each other. I don't have a big presence in Silicon Valley. They don't necessarily have a big presence at times in parts of Maryland, for example, where we're headquartered. It has resulted in an environment where we're talking past each other sometimes. So I'm trying to ask ourselves and ask the team, we got to change that dynamic. We've got to be willing to make people smarter about what we do, why we do it. We've got to be mindful we can't compromise the specifics of how we do it, because once that gets blown, which we're dealing with now, that starts to impact our ability to do our mission and defend the citizens of the nation. And that's not in the nation's best interest. But we should be willing to talk about why we do what we do, in broad terms, what we do, what we don't do. Because quite frankly, some of the things I see attributed to us, I'm thinking, you have got to be kidding me. It's not technically achievable. I wouldn't want to do it in it even if we could do it. And thirdly, it's against the law. And we obey the law of the land. And we will be held accountable if we fail to do that. As you heard me say, we follow the rule of law. We're accountable to the citizens of the nation we defend. When we make a mistake, we stand up and we say we made a mistake. That's what NSA is about, and we don't cut corners. We do the right thing the right way. And as long as we do that, as I tell the team, we're going to be fine. Let me take the heat with the outside world. That's what they pay me for. I need you focused and motivated with your head up, because I worry about the workforce. I worry about the men and women at NSA, because quite frankly, they're a little perplexed at times. We've had 2 independent reviews in the last 6 months that took a look at what we did, some of the authorities that we use to execute our mission. Both of those outside reviews that were directed by the president came back and said, NSA has not violated the law. NSA has a compliance and oversight set of mechanisms in place that have done a good job of protecting the information that they collect for the purpose of their mission. And there is no cultural or systematic attempt to undermine the rights of our citizens. The workforce looks at that and goes, so we have these independent reviews, but I keep reading this stuff in the media about, well, you're doing this or you're doing that. And they're just, we don't do that. We wouldn't do that. That's not our culture. That culture and ethos thing that I talked about, we wouldn't do that. That's not our culture. We wouldn't allow it. And I tell the workforce, look, if you make a mistake, I'll be there for you. But if you make a choice and you choose to consciously disregard the rules, the laws, the authorities, and the training and the oversight and control mechanisms we put in place, if you do that, there is no place for you on this team, and you are gone. And I'll hold you accountable for the choice you made. That's different. That's what we owe the American public. That's what we owe all of you. You have to have faith that what we're doing is done in a legal way, that is done for a purpose to protect you and help to defend you and our allies, and that you should feel comfortable that, wow, you have this amazing technical capability. And we do. If we're honest with ourselves, NSA does have a set of amazing technical capabilities. But we should also ask ourselves, hey, walk me through why I should be comfortable with that. And that's part of the conversation that I'd like to have, because I think as a nation, we can be comfortable with that. It's never either security or our rights. We got to do both. It's always about finding that balance. And in our history, that balance has tended to change at times. So I always tell the workforce, this is a good discussion for us as a nation. Don't get defensive. It's a good discussion for us as a nation. All we got to do is focus on doing the right thing the right way, and the rest of it will take care of itself. I take one more question. Sir.
Follow on. Can you explain or elaborate a little bit more on how you're going to bridge the gap between the privacy groups, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and what specifically can you do?
So, first of all, you'll see us talking much more publicly than we have in the past. I try to spend time with a greater set of organizations. I'm out on the West Coast, for example, now at least twice a year, and I'm adamant when I'm out there. I talk to universities, I talk to the corporate sector, I talk to different groups, and I tell the team, and we're going to talk to people who don't necessarily agree with what we do. We got to be willing to have a dialogue. Some will disagree, I understand that, but we got to be willing to have a dialogue. Likewise, you have seen us at NSA over the course of the last 6 months. We have publicly produced, in fact, you can go to our website and you can pull it all down if you want on the internet, some unclassified products that are designed to walk you through as a citizen. So I hear you have these different authorities and these different laws. Can you walk me through what you do under each of these? So we've put those together. Hey, here's what we do under the law in this area. This is how it works. This is what we cannot do under the law. Here's how we do what we do. Here's the oversight and compliance mechanisms that are in place that are designed to ensure that we do not violate the law and that we stay faithful to the authorities and the governances that we have in place. So that's what I'm hoping to do. And with that, let me conclude where I started. I just want to say thank you very, very much for your willingness to spend time on a very important topic. Remember, the men and women who are going to constitute this cyber workforce, they're really the foundation of the whole thing. And our success, in no small part, will rest on our ability to create a force that's got the right capabilities, has the right training and education, that it's well-led, has the right focus, the right motivation level. And that doesn't matter whether you're doing it in uniform, you're a civilian doing it for the government, or you're doing it in the private sector. We all need that. And rather than just compete against each other to do it, I would much rather collaborate with each other to figure out how can we do this together, realizing we each have slightly different needs. But we as a nation have a definite need here. And with that, thank you all very, very much.